we're recording now, so.
Okay, I'll start recording on my side, and we'll see if this blows up the streams.
Oh, that's okay. I'm sure it won't. So I'll upload it to my Google Drive, and then you can have it available for download. I'll give you a link, and you can download the whole thing.
It's all good. I'm going to record it on my side and just try to do it my way as well.
You got to back it.
So what we're going to do is like 2 podcasts at once. It's
okay.
Very meta.
Okay.
It's like Inception.
Right on. Very cool. So are we recording, and all this is actually going to end up on your podcast?
Yes.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
See, I'm the kind of person that basically, I sometimes I don't tell people when I start recording, just so I can get the gems.
Oh, okay.
So no, I'm very low tech. So
not a problem.
It's all good.
All right. So what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, we were going to talk about the problems of putting out a podcast. We sort of covered some of that already. You were talking about how you would spend hours over a podcast, and I don't edit at all.
Yeah.
Basically, I slap something together and throw it up. So maybe that's just because you're probably more a perfectionist than I am.
No, I used to do that until I listened to Martin Fisher interview on our podcast, and then I was like, well, screw it. I'll just put it out the way it is. So, I don't edit anything out. I used to do like long pauses and ums and ahs and uhs and all that. And now I just slap some intro music on it, some outro music on it, and done.
That's what I do.
Yep, that's it.
To be fair, you had a lot more ums and ahs and pauses when we first started this podcast. And now I guess you've matured a little bit. And I think I have too.
No, I just talk less.
I just listen to our podcast at 1.5 speed, and it makes us sound a lot smarter.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that hurts, man.
Do you have problems? You all have problems listening to yourself?
I used to, because I was actually on another podcast prior to this one called Major Technicality. It was like a nerd geek kind of thing. And they wanted me to, I wanted to do security stuff, and they wouldn't let me. But the one guy who normally did all the audio editing left, and he was like, this week you've got to do the audio editing yourself. And literally it took me 4 hours to do like a 3-hour podcast, or not a 2 hour, but like a 30-minute podcast. And I hated listening to myself. So I just, it's like I'm editing somebody else's podcast who just happens to sound like me.
So for the purpose of my podcast, why don't you introduce yourself for my audience?
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Betcher, you first.
Well, my name is Brian Betcher. Right now I'm doing incident response for a healthcare company. So been in security, I don't know, 4 years maybe. Right when we hired you, I guess, Brian.
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
I don't know how long ago that was. 4 years.
So, and I'm Brian Brake. That's spelled Bryan the proper way, not the misspelled way Mr. Betcher does. I met Mr. Betcher. He interviewed me for the job at Xerox, where we both used to work. And I've since left Xerox, and he has since left Xerox. And we both work for companies that we do not wish to state. Been doing the podcast for about 2 years now. We started it just before I left Austin to come up here to the Seattle area. So
what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Breaking Down Security, and that is spelled with my last name, BRAKEING, downsecurity.com.
So for those who are just joining this podcast, we're actually doing 2 podcasts at one time. We're doing Brian's podcast, and we're doing my podcast. So I'll probably try to get this out tomorrow. I try to release on Thursdays. I'm not going to step on you, am I?
No. We posted... who did we post last? We did one on antivirus. What is it good for last week? I usually post them on Saturdays or Sundays.
It's all good. However you want me to do it. I'll wait a couple days if you want to. I didn't have a podcast last week. It was just too crazy.
Oh, okay.
School started for me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, school just about to start for me in another month. I'm starting my OSCP. So
that's cool. Yeah, I have one of those.
Really? How is that?
Yeah.
How is that?
It's hard as hell.
Oh, God bless.
Yeah, it's hard as hell. I failed it once and took it again and finally passed it. I have a student who's taken it twice and he's flunked it both times. And he's a smart dude. Really, you have to focus on exploit development and
Oh, is that all?
using using a debugger, making sure you have enough space for your exploit, and you're watching your NOP sleds and all that sort of stuff. You can do it.
Crap. Now I got
My DMS can do it.
sled.
Anyone can do it. Yeah.
I don't do active exploit development, so I'm gonna have to figure out what this no-op sled thing is. And
Well,
Brian, you're in for it, dude. You are freaking in for it.
it's okay. My company's gonna be paying for it, so they can keep paying for lab time as long as I need it. So
the company that paid for mine, I immediately left after I got my OSCP.
see, I don't want to tell people that, but yeah, I hear that once you get that, it kind of opens a lot more doors. A lot like what happened when I got my CISP. It opened up a lot of doors for me.
Well, in my case, there was an opportunity to teach at a university, so I passed that up. So that's what I do now. I'm a professor and stuff.
What do you teach?
Teach digital forensics and information assurance, and I also teach. I teach in another program called Computer and Information Technology, where I teach network protocols and network administration. So mainly I teach classes like network penetration and attack, network defense, and a class in cyber warfare.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Bill?
You know what?
Is that your Bible?
I don't use that one. I use
really?
I use the top-down one. It starts the application and goes down. But I've thought really about that. That book's so old, though. It's kind of hard to get it adopted.
Well, so is the
And
protocol.
really, I would like to really see someone update that book. I think that would be wonderful, and not me, for God's sake.
For the listeners, I just held up TCP/IP Illustrated Volume 1.
Yeah, that's like the KNR for C developers or whatever, you know.
But it's a great book.
Yeah.
But I don't use it. I can't remember specifically the name of the book I use, but it's pretty widely used. I hate it.
TCP/IP for dummies.
It's basically it talks about the OSI model from the top down. So you start at application and move your way down to physical, which is a little bit more interesting for students other than starting from the bottom up. But I have been so frustrated with all the books I've seen, I've threatened to write my own. And every time I write a book, I'll say I never write another one again. And I think that we're on the cusp of writing a new book right now.
You just keep falling in that same trap, huh?
Well, I mean, in the end, it's not about the labor. It's about the love of the knowledge that you're trying to impart to other people.
First book was hard.
Right. First book was hard. Google Hacking for Penetration Testers, which we just released in the last couple of weeks. I mean, that was a pre-done book that we heavily edited. But now they were supposed – I need to talk to Johnny and Justin. They were supposed to sign an agreement to revise No Tech Hacking, Johnny Long's No Tech Hacking book. So that's hopefully what we'll be doing this year.
So let me ask you this. Do you make any money on that? I mean, really, is it significant, or is it like for the love of the what you're doing?
I make no money. In fact, I have made no money. They pay a very small advance, and then once they recoup their publication fees and all that, they'll finally make money. But I have yet to make the first dime off of royalties, and really, I do it just. Well, I'm in a publish or perish sort of paradigm where I need to publish in order to do it. And I've been blessed with a good relationship with Singress and Johnny. So that's worked out for me. But it is not lucrative at all. Singress has a very tough writing schedule. So they want a chapter like every 2 weeks, which is really tough to do if you're working a full-time job. So I try to get as much done as I can in the summertime or when I'm on break. But
why don't that's pretty hard up. Why don't you like write it first on your own time and then go to somebody to try and publish it?
The next time I do it, I will. Mainly because, as long as we're doing anything for Singress, the two books, like the one I just finished working on, the Google Hacking book and the No Tech Hacking book, which we're going to get ready to start working on, they own first rights to that, so we have to work with them. And they're really the ones who came to us and said, let's revise it. But I think moving forward, I'll write it first and then peddle it around the publishers. And Singress has been a blessing, but I would really like to write for another publisher just to see what it's like. But
You don't think you're getting screwed by the publishers?
all publishers are screwing people. It's much like the record industry in the 1960s, where they sort of, took people's works and made a lot of money off of them. And Syngress is an imprint of Elsevier, which is one of the largest publishing companies in the world. But it is not lucrative for the author unless you sell a lot of books. And most information security books sell okay, but they're not blockbusters.
Yeah.
You're not selling millions of books or anything.
Did you meet that lady at DerbyCon that was trying to pimp out the fact that she worked for a specific publisher?
No.
Okay, because there was this lady, and she ended up talking to me for about an hour before I could finally get a word in edgewise and tell her that, I'm not interested in doing a book. It's hard enough to try to do a podcast and have a job. So I think she worked for O'Reilly. I'm not sure, but.
Oh, that's interesting. I believe someone that we all know is presently writing a book for O'Reilly. Syngress has a reputation for not paying very big advances. I know if you go to like McGraw-Hill or one of the bigger academic publishers, they will actually pay you a pretty big advance. Now, of course, you have to make it back before you make royalties, but it's sort of a balancing act. Syngress sort of has a standard advance.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. You did the book on Google dorking, or Google hacking in this case. I haven't bought the book yet, obviously. I'm sorry about that. I will buy that. But so do you just discuss how to use Google for, I assume it's reconnaissance, right? Like a poor man's Maltego?
Open source intelligence, yes. And there's a lot of it's all Google dorks. A lot of it's already contained in the Google hacking database. It sort of tries to take things and tie them together. Okay. So yeah, it's just open source intelligence stuff.
And
there's
so
nothing.
I'll ask this on behalf of Brake. Do you need to know how to Google hack for the OSCP?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
No, they go through a recon lesson, but it's not it's not the important stuff. It's interesting because it seems like with most we took a CEH course. Remember Mr. Betcher? We did that in Austin. He kind of glossed over, how to do research on finding information about companies and people and things. Here's Spokio, here's Pipple, here's LinkedIn and whatever, and then we get to go do the cool stuff. It seems like no matter what you work on, it's always they gloss over the stuff at the beginning, which may actually be helpful for you along the line, down the line, and don't go through that stuff.
In my network penetration and attack class, we'll spend probably a quarter of the semester just in open source intelligence and passive recon, because there is so much stuff out there, and I think it's really important to properly stock targets before you attack them. And I think it's glossed over by a lot of different things. Yeah. To this day, I still hear Mutz talking in my ear.
Who's Mutz?
On the OSCP? Did you get the materials? Oh, my God. To this day, I still hear him in my ear.
No, I haven't gotten them yet. I just paid my 1,000 bones and tested the VPN connection and trying to decide whether I want to continue using Kali, because I can't install Node.js properly on Kali because I want to use TiddlyWiki for reporting and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't like Zim and I don't like KeepNote.
The other thing you have to remember, if you use a VM, is I recommend, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Shoot. I use all kinds of different things. I go back and forth. But if you use a VM for Kali Linux, then you can just go back and do your notes on another OS. Probably is the easiest way to do it. You can copy and paste, of course.
True.
So that's the way I deal with it. That's the way that I do. I still do assessments on my breaks, and usually what I'll do is I'll actually do reporting on my Mac, and then everything else on Kali. But
okay.
What is the name? There's a really neat tool out there for note taking. It was recommended to me by Dave Kennedy. It's called Growly Notes. It's free, I believe.
Notes.
GROWLY Notes.
Growly Bird software lets you capture everything you're interested in all in one place, organize class notes, research projects. It's growlybird.com/notes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, the reason, I hadn't, TiddlyWiki was one of the first ones I'd ever tried, wiki-wise, that I actually picked up pretty easily and could just do because the Markdown language was so simple to understand. And
we actually used to use that at one of my former jobs where we would we basically did documentation when I was a network administrator in TiddlyWiki, and that's how we shared resources and information about issues.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. There's also a great exploit for it.
I can imagine there is, yeah.
And I think that you might actually run into it on the OSCP labs. So
really,
yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe that will change my mind about not using it. Well, I'm using the new version, like TiddlyWiki 5, so I don't know if that's still.
I don't know. I know the older versions had everything has security issues. You know how that is.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. You put out a podcast every 2 weeks or semi-regularly?
I try to do it every week.
Every week?
It's just a matter of getting guests.
Yeah.
Is sort of like it's like wrestling an alligator sometimes. People are busy, and I have the luxury of not having to record at a specific time. But how do you all deal with the whole guest situation?
Well, when I started the podcast, and you'll hear some of this because we did an interview with Jay Schulman as well from Podcast Career, his career podcast. It'll be coming out in a couple of weeks, so you can look out for that. But when I first started wanting to do the podcast, I had been listening to Paul Security Weekly, Risky Business.
We all sort of listened to those. I know Paul.com was a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
When I actually got to be on Paul.com, it was scary.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They've never asked us yet, so, I mean.
Well, that's they interviewed me after the first book.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
And all you have to do is reach out to them. They'll usually interview you. They're pretty cool.
Nice. So I wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't have, I knew I couldn't carry a podcast by myself like Patrick Gray because, he does have Metal Storm. He does have Pipes. He does usually have the Gruck or somebody come on and do news.
Right.
But he gives great interview. And I needed a co-host. And, Mr. Betcher was literally in the office right next to me. And he said, hey, do you want a co-host? would you like to have some help? And I was like, kick ass. And we've been doing it ever since. We've done a podcast pretty much every week.
That's great.
For 2 years. And, we find that between the two of us, we don't need guests all the time. I mean,
I've toyed with the idea of having a co-host, and I've had Rick Hayes, who's the president of 3 or 4 Geeks, which is our local geekery organization. It's sort of like it's like a hack space without an actual hack space.
Mm-hmm.
And we do HackerCon now. It's called West Virginia Secure, and we've really toyed with the idea of having him a co-host. And sometimes he and I just talk. Yeah. Like I interview him basically. That's cool. But I can understand how it could take some of the pressure off. It also helps maybe your co-host has an idea of someone else you can have on the podcast.
Yeah.
So it's not just you trying to figure out who you can snag, which has got to be a lot better situation.
Well, the two of us, we usually do like planning meetings once in a while, or we'll, he's in Austin, so he's got a vast pool of InfoSec talent to come from. I mean, I don't know if, we're recording this on the 20th of January, so HD Moore just put out that he was leaving Rapid7 and going to a VC company. He's down in Austin. We've got a bunch of people who work for the CISO, Office of the CISO and the state CISO. There's 125 people standing every time they go to a monthly ISSA meeting down there. So, and then, I've got a lot of people up here and, sometimes we're just fearless. We just ask people on Twitter, hey, you want to be on the podcast?
Yeah, I've done that before.
My problem is, and this is the first time we've ever had this where we actually wanted somebody on, but handlers. How do you deal with the handlers?
I never had to deal with a handler.
Okay.
The hardest person really to book for me is Dave, and that's just because he's so darn busy. But usually if you bug him to death, It's the same thing when I'm trying to get. He usually comes to my conferences. I have a conference in spring called the Appalachian Institute for Digital Evidence.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you get him when he's not busy, it's pretty easy. But I've never had to deal with a handler before.
Okay. Yeah, we got Dave because I have my CISP and he just got elected to the ISC squared board, so we had him on to talk about that. It did take him a little bit of time to come on, but we caught him I think about 3 hours before he hopped a flight to go somewhere. The guy's a machine.
I know, man.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so for instance, we were supposed to interview a gentleman tonight who he's got a pretty important job and. Somebody had actually reached out to us and said, "Hey, would you like to interview this guy?" And we're like, "Yeah, cool. Just send us his information." And all of a sudden, it was like instead of us talking directly to the guy, we're playing a game of telephone.
Yeah, that's no fun.
Yeah, we want to do, we want to talk about X, Y, and Z and B, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't really want to talk about Safe Harbor because 2.0 is really still in flux, and we don't want him to say anything that's gonna, be considered pontification, and then it ends up wrong, and then he's on record." And we're like, okay, fine. So, we're, bringing up some generic topics, which are cool. And I think we only have like half an hour with him, which is something, time limits are something we've never had to deal with before. But
that sucks.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden he cancels. And we're like, oh, crap. What are we going to do this week? And we're like, well, we got the antivirus thing. We can do that. And then literally just 3 hours ago, their handler writes back. She's like, oh, yeah, his calendar's freed up. Can you do it tonight at 5? And we're like, no. We've already scheduled something. Thanks. We'll continue using the date for next week.
Yeah.
And the way they drive the conversation and stuff. And, it'd be cool if, I know we're going to get anything out of it. I don't even know if they're going to pimp out the podcast for us or anything. It'd be nice if they gave us a mention on Twitter or something. That'd be nice. But,
I don't deal well with people with agendas, and you all are probably much more listened to podcasts than I am, so I don't have the cachet that people contact me. And also, in a former life, was a journalist, so I'm very I can dance the dance with PR people, but I also know when they're trying to blow smoke up my tuchus, and they have an agenda. So basically, if you want to come on with an agenda, unless you're paying me, because I do this podcast for free with no advertisers.
Exactly.
I have issues with that, but I understand people are busy. But I've never had an issue with, dealing with a handler so far. Knock on wood.
Well, for the most part, I never really count on an interview happening. So, I mean, if we get his interview, great. If we don't, we've got, between the two of us, we've got 30 plus years almost 20 years of internet information security experience or operational, experience, or, Mr. Betcher actually's got all the fancy school learning. So he's got a CS degree, so he can talk about programming and stuff. So between the two of us, we can always scrounge up some kind of topic to discuss.
I've had podcasts where there was no topic. It was just people BSing. And those work out pretty well sometimes. And sometimes they can be kind of boring. But, my podcast has always been just two people talking. And they were really spurred. The idea for me was I used to have these long Skype conversations with people, years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, just turn this into a podcast. We're going to sit around and talk anyway.
Yeah.
And then I was also on the ISD podcast for a couple times, the InfoSec Daily podcast. Did you ever listen to that?
I think Mr. Betcher's listened to InfoSec Daily a couple times.
Yeah, they folded about 3 years ago, I think. But I did that a couple times, and that's what got me sucked into the idea of doing a podcast. And then I really didn't have time. And then I guess it was about a year ago. There was a friend of mine at a co-working space that I used to work in Charleston who said, I want to do a podcast. And I said, that's great. And so we actually did professionally recorded podcast using an audio booth and a producer and the whole 10 yards for about 10 episodes. And then they sort of they folded that venture, and I ended up trying to figure out how to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And it's just something to do for me. And if somebody learns something from it, that's cool. But as a former big fan of podcasts, I don't listen to podcasts as much as I used to, but it's fun to do one.
Yeah, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts like Down the Rabbit Hole. I used to listen to several when I had a commute, but now my
Yeah,
commute's 13
I don't.
steps and 2 lefts, and I'm in my home
Yeah,
office.
that's the same way with me. I used to have an hour commute, and now I'm down to about 10 minutes. So.
Yeah, Mr. Betcher and we just did it because we were kind of selfish because we didn't figure we would be able to market ourselves in any other method.
Yeah.
And that was the only way to get ourselves out there. So
Cool.
one thing I would suggest anybody listening to either one of our podcasts is it's not expensive to do a podcast. I mean, your audio quality may suck, but you can use the microphone on your Mac, or you can go and get a $20 USB microphone. I mean, Mr. Betcher's using the old Snowball I used to use for my original podcast. I just gave it to him because he's got a Snowball.
I don't think I've spent anything on the podcast.
Sounds darn good too.
Yeah. I mean, he's just using one of the little white snowballs with a little thing on it. I've got a shotgun mic. Mine probably sounds like crap, but I got a lot of echo in my office. So, but anybody can do a podcast if you're trying to market yourself. We did it because we get ourselves out there, we display knowledge, we get a following. So either somebody will hire us because we have a podcast, or they'll hire us because we actually have InfoSec knowledge, or we don't have InfoSec knowledge and want to shut us up. But that something like that.
We should start planning now for a podcasters meetup at DerbyCon this year.
We did one last year.
I know I missed you guys. I was probably in bed. I got to bed at like 7 o'clock.
Oh,
no! It's every DerbyCon. I miss all the fun stuff somehow. I'm upstairs in bed at like 10 or something. And I'm like, oh shoot, I missed that. So. Well,
that one was during the WMI talk because Mr. Betcher didn't go to that one because he was actually at a talk. I don't know what that's all about, but
so for the 7th time, yes, you've mentioned that.
Well, I have to because you were shirking your duties of instead of actually Well,
I was shirking something.
But you were manning the table for Hackers for Charity, right?
Me?
Well, you were behind the table.
I'm around there sometimes. It's getting so there's so many people who want to volunteer. If there's too many people behind the table, I'll basically wander off.
Yeah.
This year I don't think I spent much time behind the table. And then there's been other times like ShmooCon 2 years ago, I was the only person behind the table, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
It was just very busy.
Yeah.
But I try to as much as I can, but usually they're pretty well staffed anymore. A lot of people have stepped up to do Hackers for Charity stuff.
Yeah.
So we appreciate the help.
Yeah, we'll be giving away a couple tickets again, like we did last year for DerbyCon, and donating the proceeds to Hackers for Charity. So, actually, all of our profits this year from the podcast went to it as well. We raised.
That's great.
Our Patreon got like I think it was $142.70 or something. So I just upped it to $150 and then doubled it. So I gave him another $300. So we gave about $1,000 to Hackers for Charity this year.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first thing I thought of, because we were trying to drive people wanting to listen to the podcast. So
right.
It was like, here's 2 tickets to DerbyCon, raffle them off. You can $5 will get you an entry into it, or you can spend $100 and get a couple of entries. So.
Yeah, we actually started a Hackers for Charity student group. And it's the first one in the world. And basically what they did last semester was raise money for Johnny and send it over to him. They had a Mario Kart tournament,
okay,
which I really suck at Mario Kart, so I made it through like 1 round. But this semester they want to try to bring the Hackers for Charity spirit to our local town and do some work with maybe Union Mission, do a food drive, clothing drive, that sort of thing. But we dream of someday, maybe not this summer, but next summer, going to Uganda.
Oh, wow.
And actually hanging out with Johnny for a week or 2.
Like the whole class, or?
Yes, the whole group.
Damn.
So.
Wow. That takes a lot of money.
Well, it does, but I mean, I have colleagues that take kids on a trip every summer to Africa, or they go to Belize or someplace and they go scuba diving. It's part of the environmental science curriculum. So
I see. So like measuring sand samples.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Hawaii.
It's service learning sort of situation. So we'd like to go to Uganda and help out in the training center. or with leather crafting or something. So it's an idea.
Yep.
Brake, there's other ways to market yourself. Like you could write a book or write an app.
Nah, writing books.
Like
I don't write good. I don't talk good. So I would, I'd probably make more mistakes than I was worth.
You could take the OSCP and pass it.
I'm working on the OSCP thing. I was supposed to have started that after Derby, but I kept dorking around and not doing it. And then
it's hard. I mean, my whole thing is once I started it, it took me a year to finish mine.
Oh God, you're killing me.
Yeah, and that's because I'd come home and I'm like, I'm tired. I'm gonna play Warcraft. So I wasn't really into like the idea of like doing. So
well, see, the good thing is I've got a guy we just hired at my company who has his, and he was giving me some pointers and helping me get ready for it. And I have another friend who I met at DerbyCon for the first time, who actually, hey Hayden, what up? Who is going to do a little mentoring with me before the OSCP, and then I'll probably knock things off on them and.
Well, if you need help, I'd be more than happy to help you as much as I can. But there is an NDA involved, so
no, I completely understand. But I'm one of those people that if I don't know something, I'm Googling it constantly. So I'm the guy who's looking at something at 3 a.m, wondering why I got to this point. So
because somebody said try harder, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely try harder.
You'll get sick of hearing that before it's all over.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, especially if you go into their IRC chat room.
Yeah, I've been there for a few minutes. I've already signed up on that, so yeah.
I used to hang out in there, but I got really tired. It's tiring after a while.
Why? Because it's like people are pulling their hair out trying to figure out.
Well, yeah, it's like that, or they think maybe their server's down or their target machine's down, and it's. I have to say, the people at Offensive Security have the patience of saints when dealing with some of the issues. And then some people just come in there and troll.
Oh, yeah.
So they get kicked pretty quickly, but there's a lot of good people at Offensive Security, and really think highly of the OSCP.
Cool. Yeah, it's one of the rare certs. When we had WIM, when we were doing our ISC squared interviews, we did WIM, Remus, and Dave. And I was asking them, how do you compete with the OSCP being what it is, and how do you keep the CISP from being, completely outclassed by
what it is now
and all those? Yeah, because
sorry, I don't have one, so
no,
I'm
it's
not
cool.
trying to put it down, but
it's
this
cool.
is something I fight with as a InfoSec educator, is that kids come to me and say, I want to take my OSCP, and I think, like, that's great, but you don't have the experience yet.
Yeah.
And then, it's all the HR filter stuff. So
yeah,
I've never taken it just because I've never needed it, but I understand your point.
Well, when I took it, it was one of those things where I was a government contractor, so
right.
It was SANS wasn't an option at the time because I really didn't know about SANS. I was still, coming with my head in the dirt, like most people are that don't understand the InfoSec landscape. So I was always thinking, wow, if I got my CISP, then I'd be like the pimp shiz,
You would be elite.
Yeah, I'd be completely like, that's like a professional certification right there. And then I get that, and I get on Twitter, and I've got people like going, it ain't worth crap. And I'm like, well, it was worth something to me because I am where I am now because of it,
Yeah, that's true.
Helped me open a door, if you will, and it may be a $5,000 door, but yeah, I mean, it's something that I will never let lapse because you can always get a job with a CISP. So. See,
I was a government contractor before the requirements, so I didn't have to have certifications.
Okay.
But I took the Security Plus, which was my I have that in the INET Plus, which they don't even give anymore. Yeah. And the questions and answers on it was 20 years old whenever I took it. I took it like the month before they phased it out. But what was your experience with the CEH? Did you take it?
Oh, the course. He mentioned the course earlier.
Yeah.
Well, we took like a CEH type prep course, I guess, by the author of one of the CEH books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so yeah, it was our intro, I guess, to hacking type class.
That's cool.
Plus, it got us 40 CPEs for our CISP. So
that's also very cool.
Yeah. I think I could probably pretty easily pass the CEH, but I heard it's got even less. It's held in less esteem than even the CISP. So, it's just interesting because the OSCP is kind of a niche thing. It's like you can't. There's no way to turn a CISP into a practical test like an OSCP unless you turn it into like a security manager type thing where you're having to manage a scenario for an incident response, or something like that where you're having to handle an actual issue, because I've been told it was a management type cert instead of a technical cert.
Well, it will take culture change at ISC squared in order to get anything done like that. And Dave's been on both sides of the fence. He has a CISSP and an OSCP and an OSCE, which is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
But I think that he and Wim both really get it. So hopefully they can at least change the culture and perhaps make it more relevant in that they'll make the certification cooler.
Yeah.
The
one thing I've always wondered is, Mr. Betcher, why did we make you get your CISP? Because you got it while I was working there. Because I pressure you into that, or was that something your boss wanted you to do?
No, it was something I was going to pursue because I tried. We were a PCI shop, so I tried to go to Orlando and do that whole PCI.
Oh my God!
PCI certified assessor or whatever it was.
QSA.
Yeah.
Not the full blown QSA, but if you work for a company, you can be their official PCI guy, right? Yeah. For that company, as long as you work for that company. So I got approval from our, C-level manager, and then our PCI guy shut it down. He said, "No, why don't you just go get your CISSP?" And I think looking back at it now, he didn't have a PCI or a CISSP or something like that, and he didn't want me to become the PCI guy at Xerox. So I think that's why he put the kibosh on it. And so I was like, all right, fine, I'll go get my CISSP. And that's what I did.
Yep, first try. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how important is, you mentioned in your book, we're going to go back to the book a little bit here, but
okay.
When did it come out, and where can people find that?
Which one?
The Google dorking one that just came out.
The Google Hacking for Penetration Testers, you can find on Amazon.com. It came out on December 18th.
Okay.
And of course, I'm already requiring it for my classes. Not because I'm trying to make money off of it, but because I think it's worth requiring in my class. So
well, it costs like what, $40-$50 on Amazon?
Yeah, $40-$50 isn't a lot for a textbook. I try to keep all my books sort of affordable, so I steer away from academic publishers, and I usually use the books of my friends. Cool. So, for example, we use Georgia Viedman's penetration testing book.
Yep.
We've used Dave's Metasploit book in the past. We use Jason Street's The Forbidden Network and Network Defense, which is very affordable. So, that's the way I sort of try to address it. And then we are very, very hands-on. So we don't just read about it; we actually do it. So in the case of my penetration testing, my penetration attack class, we actually break into laboratory machines, do post-exploitation, and then at the end of the class, the final project is they have to do it in a lab that I set up, and then they have to write a report. Okay. And reporting, of course, is something we cover at the end. So we try to give them soup to nuts from beginning to end using the penetration testing execution standard, an idea of what penetration testers do, and actually do those sorts of things in the lab. So when they come out, they should be pretty well versed, at least with having a look at the tools. We use SET in the lab, for example. We'll use Metasploit in the lab. we'll find and then fix exploits. So
Bill, what do you think about all these universities having degree plans in information security? Are we just teaching the next generation of InfoSec people to be tool monkeys?
unfortunately, I think so. This has become a fight at my own university. We have a degree in digital forensics and information assurance, and we started planning a cybersecurity degree, and nobody can agree upon what it's going to look like. To me, it's a hands-on degree program where we actually do the tools. The people over in engineering see it as an engineering program. So they're like, well, we'll have to have all this math, and then they'll have to have physics. And I'm like, well, that has nothing to do with what we actually do. So we're at an impasse right now. We stopped planning the degree. If we looking at other degrees, I think there are some out there, some degree programs that are worth it, but I'm afraid that we're producing the next generation of scanner monkeys.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm trying not to do in my own. I'm trying to be disruptive and be different. But hopefully we're doing that. We're just now starting to graduate our first classes with this degree.
So to follow up, can you tell me the difference between a red teamer and a pen tester?
A red teamer is someone who works inside the organization and is using out-of-the-box thinking in order to test the mature security program of the organization. A lot of people will say I'm a red teamer, and all they're doing is they're running internal Nessus scans. That's really not a red teaming. And a penetration tester is someone who's trying to come in and simulate a breach, so that you know that in the case of a real breach, this would be the way that they would get in, and this would be what would happen, and these are things you need to fix. Red teaming goes on 24/7, 365. Penetration testing might happen once a year. So I think there's some difference between red teaming and penetration testing.
Do you think there's, to expand on that, do you think that there are too many tools out there? It seems like everybody who comes out with a new tool has a framework. The big thing was, PowerShell Empire, DerbyCon. And of course, PowerShell Empire is extensible and it's modular, right, and it allows for frameworks. And then, the granddaddy of them all was probably Metasploit. Right. Why does everything have to have a tool? Why does everything have to have a framework? Why does everything have to be contained in a VM?
To make it easier. I think that you can train people to use the tools, and that's fine, but they also need to understand what the tools are doing. For example, I teach vulnerability scanning using Nmap and banner grabbing and that sort of thing. I don't let them teach. I don't let them touch Nessus. And using Nmap scripts because and then explaining how Nmap work, which is basically manipulating the three-way TCP/IP handshake. I just don't think that people running tools without understanding what they're doing is a good idea, number one. Number two, PowerShell by penetration testers is probably the most powerful thing that's ever happened to penetration testing.
Sure.
It's probably the most overlooked, because we still haven't adopted it. I don't think a lot of people really need to try to wrap their arms around it, including myself. I mean, I teach Metasploit and I teach Meterpreter and post-exploitation using Meterpreter and some PowerShell, but I think that there's probably a lot of stuff there. And I think framework sort of helps you take something that may be pretty expansive and put it into a tool set that you can use for a specific goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because you don't have to rewrite the whole tool from scratch. You can just write the necessary bits to.
Yeah, and it may suit your need, and it may not. And I think that's the reason some people keep coming out with tools, is that they find something that doesn't fit their need, and that really is the hacker ethos, which is that you want something to. If you want to do a specific task, and a real hacker sits down and writes a tool that will perform that specific task, But it gets kind of crazy. And with, I know they stripped a lot of the wireless penetration testing stuff out of Kali Linux whenever they moved from Backtrack 4 to Kali Linux. And a lot of people were mad about that. But also the goal of framework, people who make frameworks is not to turn us all into script kiddies.
Yeah.
Which would be a bad thing.
Well, I'm a pen tester because I know how to use Metasploit, right?
Sure.
No, I have been to meetings where people, that's their primary tool that they use.
Well, that's fine, and Metasploit Pro really does it all for you.
Yeah.
I refuse to use Metasploit Pro because the GUI gets in my damn way.
Oh, yeah.
I think that you have to realize as a penetration tester, is that you're trying to, if you're a penetration tester, you're trying to get to the crown jewels of the organization. You're trying to attack what makes them money.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to be what shows them that they have a problem they need to fix. If you go in and say, well, I pop shells on your Active Directory domain controller, most C-levels are going to look at you and just shrug. What does that mean? Yeah. So you have to make it meaningful. But there's a lot of great tools out there. Dave Kennedy writes most of them. Let's start name dropping. I'm going to get hell for name dropping. But, there's tons of stuff that Dave and Trusted Sec have done are just wonderful. But there's a lot of tools I see dropped on not GitHub, GitHub, I guess, that I'll stumble across that are half-baked, that people are pushing on Twitter. And that's the reason I think that something like Kali Linux is useful. I don't always use Kali Linux in assessments, is that it's one way of having all the tools together that you can run from. And I teach with Kali Linux. But if I'm doing an assessment, I'm more likely to roll a Ubuntu box and use something like the penetration testers framework that Dave did, which will install the tools that you need. Mm-hmm. And because I'm usually running it from the cloud anyway, I don't need a GUI. Yeah. So that works well for me. And it's part of rolling your own tools. There's a ton of stuff in Kali Linux I've never used. There's a ton of stuff in Backtrack I never used. But
yeah, no, I agree. I don't use a lot of the stuff in Backtrack, and or Kali, and I was at the point where I was like, well, I should just roll my own. Jedi making his own lightsaber, and just put the stuff I need on there, which is usually Nmap. Make sure Netcat's up to date, and I use some SSL tools. TestSSL.sh is a good one, and I don't even use a lot of Metasploit, to be honest. I don't. I try not to use.
I don't think anyone uses Metasploit anymore. I mean, if you talk to most penetration testers and you ask them how was the last time they popped, into an environment, they're going to tell you social engineering. You were able to exploit the human and then turn that to a technical exploit. But
that's how the black hats do it.
Yeah, that's right. And they don't have to write reports.
That's true.
Bastards. I always said I was going to get black hat because I didn't have to write reports.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we want to have a podcast eventually on how to talk to the C-levels when you're doing a pen test report. I think that would be very important because I think there are a lot of people out there who think that pen testing is all just popping shells and Mr. Robot and whatever.
Well, I've also...
It's not helpful, yeah.
I moved toward purple teaming, where basically they know you're coming. So you say, I'm going to fire this exploit. Did you see it? Did you detect it? If not, why not? And I spent the summer doing those sorts. And that's a lot better than showing up and saying, I pwned your network. You all suck. You deserve to be fired.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes you show up after a breach and the first thing they think is that you're there to get them all fired anyway. And that's always an interesting conversation to have with the security team or the IT folks who think that their job's on the line when you're actually there to help them, not to hinder them.
Yeah, and the way you treat them, could also mean long-term investment in your company.
Right.
If you have a positive business,
might ask you back.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You want them to ask you back because
Yeah.
they want to know that you're there to help them instead of to hinder them or to harm them. So,
So
you're
you all have been in the industry for a period of time. Do you think that everything that is old is new again? Do we just keep fighting the same battles over and over and over?
I yeah yeah. I mean, education is always a thing, and it's something that needs to be done right. And I have yet to find a company that does security training properly. I mean, you have to force people to do it, and it needs to, I think, to be more targeted. I think it needs to be.
Well, have you read my first book?
Uh,
We've turned this into Bill's book corner. The Information Security Awareness Program is about doing just that. And you have to sort of social engineer your users to be safe.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not just once a year. You turn it into a process.
hmm
Um,
Yeah, and
and-
you should target, like, salespeople should get a stronger, say,
yeah,
phishing training than, say, maybe the devs. The devs should be discussing code security.
exactly.
Your CEO should understand what he should be doing with his laptop physical security.
Exactly.
If he leaves his laptop at a Starbucks thinking, oh, I'm CEO, nobody's going to touch it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think the hardest audiences I talk to on a regular basis are lawyers and doctors
Oh God.
because they think that they're too busy for security.
Yeah, don't get me started on that with the HIPAA and all the the high tech and the medical stuff, because
Right.
yeah, I heard that hospital systems are starting to take meaningful use and say, yeah, we don't really care, we're good, and they've had to draft new legislation to incentivize it in a different manner than what they've done.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients in healthcare
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot more attention being paid to it. And even in higher education, they're starting to pay a lot of more attention to security. They call it cyber security.
Yeah.
I hate the word cyber if you don't know.
That's okay.
Yeah, I don't go on my tirade right now, but
Awesome.
So you said lawyers,
yeah.
and they're they're too busy for security.
Hmm.
I don't get that. It's is it more like they're not as concerned because they don't see the real they don't see the real potential that's
I
out
think that's a
there.
big part of it. One of the things with lawyers, the first thing you have to do is explain threat. As a lawyer, either as a plaintiff or as a defense lawyer, they're sitting on a lot of intellectual property that they've gathered through discovery. And typically, law firms have had really crappy security. I spent 20 years working in law firms. And basically, my first book, was based upon my experience dealing with lawyers. Many of them have medical records. They have things they've gathered through discovery, such as formulas for drugs, for example. So it's sort of like an intellectual property paradise for somebody who wanted to get to it pretty easily. Lawyers tend to think that they're smarter than everyone else, and they also have some really bad habits about not wanting to be hindered or inconvenienced by what they see as security because it gets in the way of the billable hour in the case of defense lawyers. But I think it's getting better in law firms, but I think that in the past has been historically a very weak spot. Instead of attacking a large corporation, figure out who the law firm for that large corporation is, and then go after them because they're typically pretty soft targets. And I think that breaches in law firms are probably underreported because they love to sweep things under the rug. They're worse than the banking system.
Is that because they don't have any legal or fiduciary requirements? I mean, like, you have
It's
privacy
part of it.
requirements.
It's part of it. Unless they're being forced at gunpoint, they're not going to disclose breaches.
Yeah.
There is nothing like HIPAA High Tech, for example, or PCI for law firms. They're all going out and buying cyber insurance, and now they're finding that insurance companies are just like any other internship company where basically they're not going to pay claims based upon the fact, well, you didn't do the basics in order to secure your environment, so therefore we're not going to pay your claim. Yep. Yeah, and I think that as this gets litigated, it'll be interesting to see how that comes out. It will be, no one drives around at night in their car without seat belts, drunk, without the lights on, because they're not, if you have a wreck, your insurance company is not going to pay it. Yeah. Because you were not doing the things that you needed to do to limit your risk. And I think that's going to happen with cyber insurance too. I think people are going to have a rude awakening when claims are not being paid because they didn't do the simplest things to secure their networks or to manage their risk.
Speaking of not doing a very good job, what do you think about the trust wave issue with that casino? What's
I think that's an excellent example of how not doing due diligence is going to bite you in the ass. We live in a litigious society.
Sure.
And it may be bunk, but it'd be interesting to see how it comes out. My prediction will be settled. It'll be settled out of court, and we'll never really know what happened.
For an undisclosed dollar amount?
Yep. More than likely, somebody's insurance company will pay.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, Trustwave would just rather it go away instead of
it's easier to write a check.
Yeah. It's easier to suck that up and say, "Oh, yeah, our bad. We're going to pay you," and then be done with it.
Right. Yeah, we made a little mistake. Here's a nice little check to cover our mistake.
Yep. Will you hire us again later?
And I've had friends who have done casino work before, and I don't know. It doesn't sound like a very secure industry.
And considering, how much money they take.
Oh, yeah. There's huge targets.
Yeah.
You would think it would be more secure than anywhere.
I think it's the same thing where there's no regulations around it per se. And as a result, it's crappy. They do the very, very basics. But I've heard of MSO 8067 found on casino networks. So
goodness.
In the last decade?
Yes, in the last decade.
Wow. Well, I mean, Bill, do you have anything else you'd like to discuss or talk to us about or ask us questions of? Or
I think that I've rattled on enough.
Okay. So
I appreciate it, though, immensely.
No, that's cool. We enjoy coming on other people's podcasts and having people on our own podcast. It's a lot of fun because I know we met briefly at DerbyCon and we'd been talking about doing this for a while now, and it wasn't I was trying to blow you off. It was just I was like,
oh, good.
There was all other things happening and the holidays and whatever. So
life gets in the way a lot of times for podcasters, and sometimes your listeners don't really like it when you take breaks, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what our people would do if we took a break. They'd probably storm the Bastille and take over. So for our listeners, how would people find you, Bill, on the internets and get you and listen to you?
rebootitpodcast.com is my website, and you can listen there, or you can subscribe to iTunes. Okay. Or if you have an RSS catcher, go to rebootitpodcast.com, and my RSS feed is available there, so you can catch it that way.
Awesome. Mr. Betcher, how would people get a hold of you for people listening to Bill's podcast or our podcast?
You can catch me on Twitter at BetcherPwned, my last name, BoettCherPwned, BetcherPwned. And my company is imfsecurity.com.
Like Impossible Mission Force Security, right?
Yeah.
Like dun.
Well, security's not impossible,
Have you been listening to what we were just talking about? Yeah. So for listeners of Bill's podcast, we're the Breaking Down Security Podcast. You can find us at breakingsecurity.com, BRAKEING security.com. Yes, that is not a misspelling. That is my last name. I am at Brian Brake on Twitter, BryanBrake, and our official Twitter is at BrakeSec. We are on Facebook. You can find us there. It's Breaking Down Sec, I think, is the page. So facebook.com/Breaking Down Sec. We have a Patreon, like you heard in our podcast. In the podcast here, we donated all of our money to Hackers for Charity last year because, it was just a thing. Somebody was like, "Hey, where's your Patreon so we can support you and stuff?" And I was like, "I don't do anything with the money,
Yeah.
So it's like about the only thing I pay for is the hosting, and then I'm stupid enough to pay Facebook to try to put out ads, but they've started denying our ads for some reason. I assume it's because we're on. Yeah, I don't know what happened. It was like starting with, I think Dave Kennedy's podcast. It said, "Oh, not boosted anymore," and I was like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Well, we've decided to not allow you to because we don't like what you're advertising." And I'm like, "I'm sorry."
What?
For the last almost 2 years, you've allowed it.
It's about hacking. Is that what it is?
I honestly don't know. Maybe they don't like Dave Kennedy, and then somebody's actually started listening to the podcast and realized that it's evil hackers stuff. I don't know.
That's crazy.
But for like almost 100 podcasts, we've had no problems boosting the content. So I think it started right after we did TuneIn app. We're on the TuneIn network. So if you search for us on TuneIn or Stitcher, we're on Stitcher as well. So I think once those started, they decided to not start allowing us access to that stuff. So I find I get more by just more people looking at my podcast by just spamming other Facebook groups like IT, security, NetSec, groups, that kind of thing. So.
But you would find the answer to your stupid question on Breaking Down Security.
Actually, I just post our show description and a link to the podcast and just say, hey, here's what our podcast is about. If it's a violation of self-promotion, you can feel free to delete it. But
I might not publish until after you publish your show notes because I can steal them.
We don't have show notes on this one, I don't think. It's we'll have a link to your. We'll definitely have a link to your book in our show notes. And
I write really like small summaries of what's on the podcast.
Yeah,
but
I've seen them, and you actually have an image for each one too.
Yeah, I try to do it. I don't know if I have an image for you all. I'll figure it out.
I'll send you the avatar that we use, but if you want. But Mr. Betcher, you're just real all passive aggressive right now, ain't you? With that.
With what?
It hurts. I tried to find new images for every podcast, but it's really difficult. I mean,
it is hard.
Yeah, because and stuff that isn't copyright protected or anything. So
that one.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
I just steal stuff from Facebook.
That's true. Yeah, we could do that.
I figure like if there's a picture of somebody on Facebook that's in their profile, it's game.
True. So when we have Lee Brotherston on, I'm gonna make this one the podcast. The podcast post link. Do you know Lee Brotherston? He was at DerbyCon. He gave a talk there.
No.
He's from Toronto. He's really good people. And somebody posted that on Twitter, and I'm like, yeah, that's going to be the picture we put up for his podcast next time.
Interesting. So. You may want to describe the people who are not watching this on television what exactly that is.
Yeah, because we don't do video. That's one thing. So Lee is Canadian. So one of the things that Lee does, he's got a sweatsuit on, a gray sweatsuit with a little toque on. And he's got what looks like Kraft macaroni and cheese box and a bottle of maple syrup. And he's in a very seductive pose.
I thought that was bourbon.
Oh.
Or I guess it was Canadian Club.
No, that's like grade B maple syrup because he's from Canada. His wife's he's from Canada where the Canadians are, and he's actually British, so he's a really awesome dude. Hopefully he'll be at DerbyCon, and I will definitely introduce you next year.
Most definitely.
So. He's good people. If you want to talk to him, he's always up for an interview or something. He did a TLS fingerprinting one recently, so.
He's in the Princess Leia pose also.
Yeah,
yeah. She was in the prison,
but no gold bikini. That would just be weird. So
no. When she was on the Death Star in the prison.
Oh right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
So that was.
I have a big guest coming up, but I don't know that I can announce it yet. But he has agreed, and it's taken months to get his time.
Oh my god!
So we'll see how that goes.
I hope that works out for you.
Yeah, listen in. I was like, "Hey, you want to do this?" And he's like, "I've been waiting for you." And I'm like, sorry." And then he had to get out of town, so most definitely it'll be in it. So stay tuned, and we'll see if we can get that done.
That's cool. I have one other question. Why Charleston, West Virginia? That doesn't seem like to be really a hotbed of InfoSec. I mean, it's kind of centrally located.
It's where I live. I mean, I grew up in a town called Richwood, West Virginia, which is a couple thousand people in the mountains. I came to Marshall University and got 2 degrees. I lived and worked in Charleston for about 20 years, and now I've moved back to Huntington this spring, so I'm closer to work. But West Virginia's home, so I like
Bill,
staying here. Yeah.
Hatfield or McCoy?
Oh my God.
My family actually came from Eastern Kentucky, my mother's family, and they were aligned with the Hatfields. Oh. My great-grandmother was once engaged to one of Devance's sons.
Okay.
Yeah.
She broke it off? What?
I think I'm not sure what happened. My own family was involved in another feud that is not highly publicized. It was just the way of the mountains back then, I guess. My grandmother once started my great grandmother, the same one, once started a gunfight by throwing a rock at when people were meeting over a allegedly horse that had been horse thieved. So she threw a rock and there was a gunfight that ensued. So, yeah. Now that I've made out myself to be toothless, ignorant hillbillies.
Yeah.
I do wear shoes and I have teeth. So.
Well, no, I wondered that because
But do you have all your teeth?
That's true.
Actually, I went to B-side Charleston, South Carolina, and managed to break off one of my front teeth eating shrimp and grits.
Oh my God!
Which is fixed now. So I am blessed because my fiance's stepfather is a dentist.
Oh,
so that's always good to have a dentist in the family.
Exactly. So, I mean, with West Virginia kind of changing, it used to be a lot of coal going on in the area, and that's kind of going away. What do you see in the way of industry happening there? Is it becoming more tech savvy, or is it?
We have a lot of tech here in West Virginia, especially in the northern part of the state. The FBI fingerprint center is there. NASA has a pretty big fingerprint in the state. One of my old government jobs was working as a contractor for Housing and Urban Development, who actually has their data center here in West Virginia.
Okay.
After 9/11, they sort of tried to spread some of that stuff out, so a lot of it ended up here. We're about 6 hours from D.C. here in the northern part of West Virginia. You're about 3 hours away from D.C. So there's definitely a tech sector. The only other thing in West Virginia that we're known for is chemicals.
Okay.
Polymers.
I was just about to Google that.
Yeah, polymers specifically. So Union Carbide actually started in Charleston, West Virginia. And they accidentally invented antifreeze in a place called Elkview, West Virginia, which is north of Charleston. And they moved their main facilities to South Charleston, West Virginia, and they were merged with Dow about 15 years ago, I think. And I think Dow is now being acquired by somebody else, but it's not as big as it used to be. But Chemical Valley is
Chemical Valley
part of it. So DuPont has a number of plants here, and a couple of other Bayer has a couple of plants here as well.
Okay. All right. Well, we don't normally go over an hour anymore.
Well, I don't normally go for an hour either. I'm afraid everyone falls asleep.
Yeah. Well, we used to split up our big podcasts where we had interviews into 2 because we were trying to get that. And I got feedback that it's a little too much for one guy for 2 weeks. Yeah. So we've cut back our podcasts to just 1 episode for an interview. But unless it's just really interesting or we can get 2 separate topics out of it, like with Bill Semth when we had him on.
Yeah.
Hey, that's another guy you should have on. He's really great about DevOps and stuff. He's really great. He's awesome.
My longest podcast, as I had Alex Hammerstone and Katie Mansours on, and they spent most of it trolling me. They would not get off the podcast. Like I would say something, and then they bring up something else that was just completely non secular about. Okay. So you ever try pancakes? It was always, and this went on for an hour and a half, and I finally got them off. But it's pretty funny.
Right on. All right. Well, I mean, we're good. I mean, if you want to, stop recording or whatever,
No, I'm good. I'll go as far as you all want to go.
Well,
I'm having a good time. This is the best time I've had all day.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I came home with a headache after this afternoon. I was like, man, I'm gonna be dead at 9 o'clock.
Okay. All right. So
I'm actually better.
Since you're having a good time, I have a Bob story. So
okay.
We have Bob comes into work today, and all of a sudden he's been pulled into a meeting because of that Android vulnerability, the Linux kernel vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I got pulled into a meeting.
Bob
got pulled. Shit. Bob got pulled. I'm not good at this. All right, so I got pulled into a meeting. All right, so we're gonna put the Bob thing. It was actually me. I was the Bob. So we're having this meeting, and I had already read the write up on this Android thing, and it was local Privesc,
Right.
And the only reason it's such a big deal with Android is because you have physical access to the box, and all the machine applications run locally on the box and can take advantage of this kernel vulnerability if you download the right one.
Right.
So I'm sitting in this meeting, and our DevOps people and our cloud manager and everybody, because we use the cloud, are like, hey, yeah, okay, so what are we going to do to fix this? They'd already started the meeting like for 15 minutes, and I'm like, why are we worried about this? This is a local vulnerability, not a remote, and we have controls and stuff. And they're like, the CEO and the CIO found out about it and were wondering what we were going to do about it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I've now added something, because I did a talk this month at ISSA Rainier up here in Washington about vulnerability management, about how you properly rate your vulnerabilities. Like the CVSS is just a beginning score, and you have to base it on the controls you have in place, the severity, where the machine that has a vulnerability sits in your environment. I need to add another bullet that says, whether the vulnerability has a name and whether or not your CEO actually saw it come across its browser.
It should have a name, and also it needs to have a really catchy logo.
Yeah, and you're really screwed if it has its own theme song. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Heartbleed's the most famous, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But
I
that's my
had that
point.
issue. My Bob story is Bob once got called into the managing partner's office of his law firm and wanted to know if Flame was going to attack our local law firm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's fear, uncertainty, and dread sells products. That's the reason the cyber boys still use it. But yeah, sometimes you just have to talk people down off the roof.
Well, no, we're patching it anyway, and I was like, it's a local Privesc, and and the interesting thing is, if you're running a certain version of kernel, you have to upgrade. But if some of the boxes in your network don't get regular kernel upgrades, you may actually be exempt from it if your kernel is old enough.
Right. I was talking about that with somebody.
Yeah, like if you're running Ubuntu 12, you're not vulnerable.
Nope.
You're good. You're safe. But 14 and anything higher than 14 LTS, I think, and you're gonna have to patch. Which I found interesting. So you have to add what your CEO thinks or knows about or doesn't know about the vulnerability, and whether or not it has a name and a logo. So those were some things I learned today.
So I will say one thing. You are not in line for Snowmageddon.
Really?
We're supposed to get feet of snow up here, including and DC is under a blizzard watch.
Well, we got our 2 inches already this year, so we're good.
Yeah, I'm done with snow. I'm already done.
We're about 850 feet up from Seattle, so we're halfway between Seattle and the mountains. I live in a village called Snoqualmie, and it was a big deal for us to get snow this low to the ocean. And we got about 2 inches, and it lasted all of about a day and a half, and we haven't got anything since. It's just mostly rain right now. So.
Well, I hope they're wrong, because I really don't want to be stuck inside for 2 days, and I'm kind of a workaholic. I guess I can play WoW for 2 days. I don't know.
There you go. Set you up
easily.
Yeah, there you go. Horde or Alliance?
Horde, of course. I asked my students. I ask my students if they're Horde or Alliance, and when they tell me Alliance, I tell them it's going to affect their grade.
Oh, ouch. Yeah, I used to play that with my with consulting group I used to have. And then I realized I was playing all by myself and grinding all by myself.
See, I'd rather play by myself. If I wanted to deal with people, I'd actually deal with people. And so I started doing it as sort of escapism.
Yeah.
So I don't do well with guilds, especially ones who want to do DPS recounts every time you hit a boss.
Yeah.
So I've left numerous guilds. We did start a guild, which was a spoiler for Star Wars a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Someone dies, and that was the name of our guild.
Oh.
Just because we're jackasses.
Nice.
So,
nice.
I'm sure we got reported to Blizzard.
I played World of Warcraft for a lot of time, and then I realized I have stuff I have to learn, and it's not going to get me a job somewhere. So
I know.
So I do war games and stuff now online. So
I still play Warcraft. Just because, I don't know. It's the only thing I have.
I got it. I got it when the Kung Fu Panda expansion. I mean, I'm sorry.
I was not a fan of Pandaria. I came at the end of Lynch King.
Okay.
So I went all the way through Cataclysm.
Yeah.
Pandaria, and now whatever we're on this week. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like they're pumping out expansions.
Well, they have to. They're losing tons of subscribers.
Well, there's still millions of subscribers. There are more people working there now than there were in the past. They used to run that whole thing with like 16 people. Now they have like hundreds of people, and it's not any better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I heard they got a major graphics upgrade that I didn't get to see, so I don't know if it made a difference or not.
Well, they are also good about writing software that's playable on old hardware, which is cool with me.
Yeah.
Because I never really have beefy machines, and I'm Mac based. Yeah. The only thing I've run into recently was my new guild wanted us to use Vent, and I can't find a 64-bit version of Vent that will run on my Mac.
Only the 32-bit?
The 32-bit said it was damaged and wouldn't install, so I have no idea what's going on with that.
Okay.
Probably trying to pwn me.
Yeah, that's true. A little Trojan, little hot beef injection going on there. Yeah.
Hot beef injection. That's the name of our next big exploit. We should find an exploit and release it as hot beef injection.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's awesome. Well, I'm truly out of things to talk about. So breaking down security fans, listen to Mr. Bill's podcast. Oh no, Mr. Bill.
And vice versa.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Bill, you're always welcome to come back if you want to. If you want to talk up if you actually want to do a podcast where you're talking about your book or something you're interested in talking about, like
I've talked enough about the book. My listeners are probably sick of hearing about it, to be honest with you.
Understood.
But I'd be happy to come back anytime, and likewise, if you guys ever want to come back to my podcast, let's do it.
Right on, man. All right. Well, that was it for this week for Bringing Down Security and the Rebooted podcast. So I guess that's it. Everyone have a great week.
Bye.
Later.